I have my apron on underneath my caftan. I think I'll be okay. If not, I might really embarrass myself. I am actually venturing out in public in my 18th century period apron to test it in real life situations. God, I hope I don't regret this.
Hey everyone! So one of the most frequently asked questions in my video, I wore 18th century clothes every day for 5 years and this is what I learned, was what do you do when you're on your period? Which is kind of awkward, but here we are. Now, I gave a short answer in my Q&A response video, but I wanted to go more in depth with this subject and this idea. So that's why we're here today, to talk about periods and stuff. If the discussion of blood, menstruation, bodily anatomy, or words like moist or discharge make you uncomfortable, this video probably isn't gonna be for you. Also, side note, no, I never actually thought I'd be talking about my period on YouTube in front of potentially 1 million people, but here we are. Woo. Now, before we get into the meat of this video, I do want to take a moment to speak on how sex and gender are going to be addressed within this video. For my research, I only referenced primary sources, meaning I only looked at books, magazines, newspaper articles from the 18th century. They had a very different view of sex and gender than what we do today, and they use heavily gendered language in their books and articles. I want to be clear that I want my channel to be an inclusive space for everyone, and while I will do my best to use inclusive language in this video, my references used heavily gendered language. Additionally, I wanted to say that while I use the terms female, woman, lady, etc. in this video in part because of my references, I do not believe that only women have periods, and you definitely do not need to have a period or a uterus to be considered a woman. I fully believe that gender is a societal construct and that there are more than 2 genders in this world, because there are. Additionally, for the sake of clarity, I am a cisgendered female and I will also be speaking from my personal experiences as well, especially in the second half of this video. This video will be broken up into 2 main sections. The first is a discussion of how England viewed and discussed menstruation. Since I cannot read 18th century French, Italian, or Latin, or Spanish, or any other language for that matter, I couldn't read any of those references that I came across. So this research is heavily based in Anglo-American beliefs, medical practices, and assumptions. It does not reflect the rest of Europe or any other country or continent during this time. I will be summarizing what I learned and interpreting that for you here. I have a large list of resources in the description down below, and probably also a pinned comment depending on how big this gets. It depends on how much room YouTube gives me. And many of them are actually free and easily accessible for you. However, some are restricted to paid databases or that you can get through a university library membership or even some very large city public library memberships. Part 2 is the experiment itself, where I recreate a possible 18th century period apron and test its effectiveness. Also, side note and total overshare, I am wearing one right now because when my uterus heard we were gonna be filming and talking about her today, she wanted to join the party. Thanks, uterus. I also want to take a minute right now to thank the sponsor of this video, Care Of, and Care Of is a customizable and personal vitamin and supplement company. It's important for us to take care of our bodies, and menstrual health isn't a huge part of that. With a quick quiz on Care Of's website, you can figure out what vitamins, minerals, and supplements you need in order to achieve your personal health and wellness goals. For me, I'm interested in maintaining my immune system, taking care of my hair, skin, and nails, cognitive health, as well as taking care of my heart, keeping my stress levels down. And also, I really am concerned about keeping my iron levels up since I am a little bit anemic. To help me out, Care Of sent me collagen, unflavored electrolytes, fish oil, iron, rhodiola, and astaxanthin. I've been using these products for a couple weeks now, and I'm very happy with their quality and effectiveness. I love how they've packaged the vitamins with the correct daily allotments and that they are in personalized compostable packets with really lovely little motivational quotes on them. It's really kind of nice. They even have instructions on how to compost the packets so you don't have to worry about causing any unnecessary waste, which frankly is a really good thing. Just follow the link. I've always been a bit cautious about the quality and sourcing of my supplements, thanks to my mother like drilling that into my head. So I do really actually appreciate how transparent Care of is on their website about their research, their sourcing, and the quality of their products. They have tons of educational resources available on their website, so go check that out there, or you can follow them on Instagram at Care of. If you're curious to know more, go take Care of's quiz to see what vitamins, minerals, supplements you could use in your daily habits to help improve your health and wellness, and click the link below to get 50% off your first month of Care of vitamins, minerals. Woo! Thanks to Care of again for sponsoring this video that could very well get demonetized. Because periods. When I was researching this topic, I came to two very quick conclusions. Conclusion number one, they loved talking about menstrual cycles in medical books. Loved it. But they didn't really bother talking about normal cycles or more mundane aspects of having your period. So the question of menstrual products, how they were used, what women used, things like that, it was never really addressed. Oh, apparently I have a third one here. Go me. I think that 99 to 100% of my references are actually written by male physicians. I couldn't find a book written to a young woman by a female author, kind of like what we have today, like when we were growing up, which brings me to one conclusion. This stuff just, unless it was discussed from a medical perspective, it wasn't really written about. It's also that it was so commonplace that it wasn't really deemed worth writing about either. So when menstruation is written about, it is from a medical point of view, and more time is spent on why menstruation exists, problems around menstruation, how to deal with irregular periods, super heavy periods, overly painful periods, etc. Honestly, it's a lot of the same stuff that we see our doctors about today. Now here's what they knew about periods in the 18th century. Periods began anywhere from the ages of about 10 to 18. They believed that menopause correlated directly to that age as well, so it was more like a set time frame in which you menstruated. So the younger you began your period, the earlier that menopause happened, and around 45 years old for women. Climate and weather were leading factors into the age in which periods would begin. Warmer climates being younger, like the Mediterranean, etc. Cooler climates being older. They used Lapland actually as one example of women not really having that much of a period. They also had a few different names for the cycle, for your cycle during this time, and I've just made a list of all of them. So we found menstruation, menses, or it's like menses, but it has the apostrophe, so it's like minutes, plethora in women, puberty, the monthly flux, gift of nature, menstrual discharge, because that sounds lovely, courses, pretty standard, regular last, which was kind of random, menstrual fluid, okay, menstrual discharge, and then my personal favorite, the morbid flux. They also just called it having your period too. So yeah, actually, funnily enough, terminology hasn't really changed all that much in the past 300 plus years, but there we go. I kind of want to bring back morbid flux, personally. I think it's a good one. Now, they also understood that menstruation related to fertility, and that beginning your period is when you had really started puberty, and that you were fertile and able to have children. Doctors were also able to connect menstruation cycles to the lunar cycle, that the average cycle was around 28 days, and that diet, exercise, lifestyle all played parts into what quality of period that you had, its regularity, its irregularity, pain, severity, things like that. They didn't really discuss like endometriosis or PCOS. I don't think they really knew about it at that point in time because that's a little too advanced for them. Physicians acknowledged that women who led a more active lifestyle, farmer wives or women who worked in more active trade work, could have less painful and less menstruation periods, which also fully aligns with medical findings today. Female athletes or AFAB athletes, usually when they're in peak training season and they're working out really hard, they usually don't have a menstrual cycle. So that kind of ties in really, really well when it comes to the physicality of a farmer's wife or a woman who does a lot of manual labor as a part of her day-to-day life. Another thing is also the quality of diet. So a woman who had obviously a poor diet in the 18th century was less likely to have regular periods, and they were able to make that connection as well. Yeah, they understood some stuff just like we do today. Also, they found that women women who led more sedentary or luxurious lives were a little bit more prone to heavier flows and possibly even more painful periods. However, they did not understand how fertility worked and how the female reproductive organs also work. Like, what is ovulation and why does the uterus shed its lining 12 to 16 days after you ovulate? It's a mystery to them. They would describe it as a plethora of fluid in the uterus. And then in other 18th century texts, doctors just thought it was because it was a buildup of perspiration and stuff. So it's like bloody sweat coming. I don't really know. It doesn't make any sense, let's be honest. While they don't talk about the daily normal dealings with periods, like how we just normally function, they do talk about problematic ones and pain management. So we're able to discern some information from that more specific conversation. All period symptoms that we deal with today were also experienced in the 18th century. Cramps, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, tenderness, bloating, swelling, cravings, all of it. Be nice to us. It's really unpleasant. So it's like, welcome to the overshare. How it was dealt with varies since they didn't have the same pain medication that we do today. However, I did find some things that we kind of do the same thing for. References to warm and cool compresses. Cool very often being a water and vinegar mixture because the vinegar helps keep everything cooler and lower body temperature. And those compresses could be applied to the loin and abdominal region where the woman is experiencing pain and discomfort. Warm or cool baths. Yes, people bathed back then. Salves, poultices to help deal with the swelling, inflammation, teas and tinctures for headaches, pain, stomach issues, as well as just drinking alcohol like wine for pain management. And then my personal favorite, laudanum for really bad cramps. Because let's just cut to the chase, guys. Just take the opium, you'll feel a lot better because you won't know what's going on. It's great. Seems extreme, but I know actually quite a few people who menstruate who take Tylenol codeine medication to help deal with their severe menstrual cramps. Codeine's an opiate, so it's really actually not all that different. The only thing they didn't have was ibuprofen. The doctors also acknowledged that the experience is different for every person in the 18th century. Some women in the 18th century could go about their daily life on their period while others were bedridden for a day or more. What did people use to deal with the menstrual discharge during their courses? This is where things start to become a little bit more mysterious. Period products or garments for periods are not discussed in any of the midwifery or medical books that I looked through. The best reference that I found is from a 1733 murder trial where the defendant, Sarah Malcolm, claims that the evidence of her bloody shift and apron are actually from her period blood and not from the victim. Her defense states, "Modesty might compel a woman to conceal her own secrets, if necessity did not oblige her to the contrary. And 'tis necessity that obliges me to say, that what has been taken for the blood of the murdered person is nothing but the free gift of nature." This was all that appeared on my shift, and it was the same on my apron, for I wore the apron under me next to my shift. My master, going out of town, desired me to lie in his chamber, and that was the occasion of my sole linen being found there. The woman that washed the sheets I then lay in can testify that the same was upon them, and Mr. Johnson, who searched me in Newgate, has sworn that he found my linen in the like condition. That this was the case is plain. For how is it possible that it could be the blood of the murdered person? If it is supposed that I killed her with my clothes on, my apron indeed might be bloody, but how should the blood come upon my shift? If I did it in my shift, how should my apron be bloody, or the back part of my shift? And whether I did it dressed or undressed, why was not the neck and sleeves of my shift bloody as well as the lower parts? Unfortunately, though her defense was sound, Sarah Malcolm was convicted of murder and sentenced to death in February of 1733. For this experiment, I looked to 18th century clouts, or what we would call diapers in American English, and what kind of materials they were using for cleaning because of absorption and things like that. This led me to trying to find a bird's eye woven linen, or also what you could call a diaper weave linen fabric. From there, I created my first apron, which I left the whole cut intact, so it was 60 inches wide by 36 inches long. I wasn't sure how much coverage I was going to need, so I opted just to make it it's full size.
So this is made out of diaper weave linen, which is what babies' nappies and diapers would have been made out of in the 18th century, which is why I went with it, because it's supposed to be absorbent. I did not cut it down, so it's 60 inches wide, which frankly is way too wide for a lady's apron at this point in time. But anyways, it's here, it's stitched, I'm not changing it. So we're just gonna go with it. So this is 60-inch wide fabric between my legs. Oh, look at that booty. Look at that booty. I have layers of fabric here. So I actually think that this is going to work really, really well. In the pursuit of full disclosure and mild embarrassment, this is what happens to my slightly organized costume closet when I'm looking for a pair of stays that is in a completely different closet altogether. First layer is going to be the monster bloody apron, right? Okay, so we have that. Then I'm gonna put my 18th century shift. Over top of that, I'm gonna have my mock quilted under petticoat. And then I'm gonna wear my very, very lightweight, loose, comfy summer weight stays. These are just two very sturdy pieces of plain Osnaburg linen that they have been lightly boned. They lace up the front. I can leave them loose so that way I'll be comfortable. And then over top of that, I'm gonna wear a button-up shirt. So it's gonna be this very weird mishmash of history and J. Crew. So I just wanted to take a second real fast just to kind of show you before I put my stays on that this is what it looks like with the apron, my shift, and my under petticoat on. I mean, like, there is obviously fullness here and there's padding, but you can't really tell. I'm super actually very, very happy, super actually happy about how this is looking so far and how it's working. And I wanted to lace them enough that I could feel a little bit of pressure against my abdomen, because a lot of people actually like wearing corsets during this time of the month, because that pressure on our abdomen actually really feels good. And I mean, I'm the same way. I usually like to have like weight or something there kind of compressing that in. Do you see how flat my front looks here? Like, I have all of that apron like right here, but it's laying nice and smooth. So what this is telling me is that if I wanted to, or if I was in a situation where I needed to, I could wear a normal gown and a normal petticoat, a bum roll, and it really wouldn't be noticeable. This is how I'm gonna spend the rest of my day. I have a couple of chores that I need to do around the house, so I figured I would do them, take you guys along with me, and, well, we'll get this sorted out, won't we, guys? Like, this will be fun.
One extremely annoying shift later.
So I've been wearing my ensemble. It's definitely been over 6 hours, and I just went to the bathroom for the first time because apparently I'm not drinking enough water. I don't know. But I am actually very, very surprised by how well the apron is working. I have had 0 leaks, and the linen actually is doing a really good job about keeping everything very comfortable and dry. You know how if you use, for those of you who use like the absorbing underwear, at least for me, I'm not always a big fan of how it feels, especially on a heavier day. And I know this is like super overshare, but here we are. I don't feel that way. I feel very normal and comfortable. I will say the only thing that I'm not happy with is how wide my apron is. Hi, buddy. Honey, I'm not here for you right now. Can you get off? Get off. Let's get off. Sit. Thank you. Okay. The only thing I'm not a fan of is the mistake that I made in not making the apron narrower. It's too full. It's a 60-inch wide piece of fabric that has a lot of body to it because of just how it's woven, even though it's loosely woven. And so I just need to cut it in half and then it'll be much more comfortable, because right now, all of that linen, from what I can see, I don't actually need all of that linen down there. I can very well have half and I will be just fine, because it's not going anywhere. It's being absorbed directly into the apron and it's staying there. I think this is actually a fantastic option. It is super logical, it's super practical, and I am actually very comfortable with how this works.
For my second cycle, I cut the apron into two since the initial width ended up being too wide and it caused some chafing and discomfort between my legs. I then also opted to make a third apron, which is what I'm actually wearing now, out of just a very old linen bed sheet from Brooklinen. So literally it's just a massive rag. Additionally, I wanted to test how visible the apron would be under my modern clothes because, you know, why not?
My original plan when it comes to wearing these aprons was to stay home in case I had any accidents, but I realized that I needed to go, someone's watching me. So I needed to get stuff for my 5 tips and tricks video. I needed some needles and some thread and stuff so that way that video can be like the best that it can be. So this is kind of like some weird Matrix Inception thing, and everyone, it's so busy here. Why is it so busy here? It's supposed to be quiet. Wow, this is really awkward to do. I have to be really honest. So that's what we're doing now, and I have my apron on underneath my caftan. I think I'll be okay. If not, I might really embarrass myself. But you know what? It's mostly like older ladies that work at Millen, so I feel, and they all know me, so I feel like if something's wrong, they literally have my back. So, and plus I can always buy more fabric. Yeah. So that's what we're doing right now. So I am actually venturing out in public in my 18th century period apron to test it in real life situations. God, I hope I don't regret this.
So what did I learn from this experiment? Once I narrowed the aprons a bit, I found them actually to be extremely comfortable to wear for the whole day. The gathered up material between my legs provided essentially multiple layers of absorption, and linen's wicking properties made me feel cool, dry, and comfortable the whole day. I know, right? When I wore the apron, I always felt dry and I always felt comfortable. So I've actually been really tempted to sleep in this too, other than the fact that I think my husband would think I was weirder than normal. Because he already thinks I'm pretty weird. Whatever. So the bulk of the apron isn't really noticeable under modern clothing either, and it definitely wasn't noticeable under 18th century clothes. The only issue that I found really was going to the bathroom. I had to like re-gird my loins, and doing that under stays is a bit tricky. It's not impossible, it's just tricky and kind of awkward, and you know. While I don't have a particularly heavy cycle, I did wear the aprons on my heaviest days, so that way I could test the limit as best as I physically could. I never bled through, which frankly was awesome. Does that mean that I think it's be that way for everyone? No, I think if you're someone who has a particularly heavy flow, you would probably bleed through. However, the nice thing about the apron concept, and I'm speaking about this from an 18th century perspective, is that if you were someone who bled through, you could have, you know, your period shift, you would have your period apron. You could wear another apron as an additional protective layer between your girded apron and your shift if you wanted to. Your shift also will do some absorption. You also could have a period petticoat that could absorb it as well, and then additional layers of security. For example, wool flannel is extremely common for under petticoats, and that in and of itself is a very absorbent fabric and could do a fantastic job helping absorb a lot of fluid without actually soaking through. So I think as an 18th century person, when you were menstruating, I think you would be able to come up with multiple ways of layering in order to keep yourself comfortable. So washing and cleaning my aprons was actually pretty damn easy. The stains came out using my sanitize setting, which would correlate nicely to being boiled and scrubbed by laundresses in the 18th century. I would hypothesize that women in the 18th century would have a set of period aprons that they would use for their period. The question is whether they were just purposely made or if they were using old stained aprons. That's up for debate. However, I have noticed that my aprons need to be a certain length in order to work for this, and so needing a longer apron might have resulted in an intentionally sewn apron pack for this use. I haven't looked into millinery ads to see if I can find evidence of aprons being specifically made of diaper that were being sold, but honestly, I think just normal linen or wool aprons would do a fantastic job. I don't think diaper linen is really needed, but it definitely was created to help with absorption, and it was used in diaper clouts and napkins, so the connection is pretty logical to me. Aprons were sold ready-made in millinery shops and general warehouses in the 18th century, and their fabric content isn't always provided. What this would indicate is a large assortment too tedious to mention of aprons, or a very common and specific type of apron that the 18th century person would need to have clarified. Specialty aprons like ruffled or muslin ones are clarified, however, in advertisements. If you're wondering why I'm not using a rag in this kind of experiment, one of the reasons is we have a primary source reference to an apron. There's also the logical aspect for me. Logically speaking, shoving what is basically a large napkin between my legs and then trying to keep it up there without any sort of belt or tie apparatus just doesn't make any sense to me. And since I couldn't find a reference to a belt or tie apparatus, I basically just disregarded that as an option. However, I did have some difficulty with girding the apron underneath my stays, so it does make me wonder if a rag and belt system would have actually worked better or even could have been worse. Another option is if I had just left the apron down in the back and essentially free bled. I didn't want to do that simply because I don't think that that is the most logical thing to have happen. I do think that women in the 18th century did free bleed on occasion, just like there are people who free bleed today on their period. I just think as a single layer of fabric, the apron isn't as efficient, where by bringing it up between my legs, it's catching everything. And by having it gathered up between my legs, it's creating that multiple layers of absorption, which is what we need, which would mean more of the apron is actually helping do its job versus a small section. So here are my final thoughts on this whole experiment. One, I think that linen aprons for your period is actually a genius option, and they're totally awesome, whether it's for the 18th century or for the 21st century. And I'm extremely pleased with the end result of this experiment. So much so that I am actually literally wearing one right now because it's the first day of my cycle, and I find this to be a lot more comfortable than other modern period products that I use for this phase of my cycle. For us modern folk who have periods, while the apron really wouldn't work under tight-fitting pants or jeans, but let's be honest, who wants to wear tight-fitting pants or jeans when you're starting your period anyways, because gross. I find that these aprons are actually a fantastic modern option as well. They're reusable, they're natural, they biodegrade, and they're so much more comfortable than a lot of the period products that are being sold to us today. So with that, everyone, that wraps up this week's video. I hope that those of you who have been at home wondering what 18th century people did when they were menstruating, I hope that I've been able to help answer that question for you, to shed light on that question for you, and to kind of give you a little bit more historical, in-depth, beefy knowledge on the subject. Do you really have to do that right now? All right, so I hope you all have an amazing rest of your week. What was I talking about? I don't even remember. Oh yeah, thanks for watching. I do hope that you all enjoyed this week's video. I post every Sunday, so if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do so. And let me know in the comments below if you have any further questions about this kind of subject matter, or if you have any other myths or subjects that you want me to bust, or just kind of topics to dive into further. Other than that, I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you all back here next Sunday with a new video. Bye! Who's baby? Who's the baby? I'm the baby. From the 17... At least there's a baby there that goes. Oh yeah. Look at that. So good. Do you want to tell everyone on YouTube that you're feeling better after you had to go to the vet because you keep eating rocks? Yeah? Yeah, I took him to the vet last week because he was in pain because my precious boy eats a lot of rocks. And funnily enough, when you live in the desert and you've zero escaped your backyard's full of rocks. It's been fun. Try this again. I can't type. So do we want to do a freckle count? You want to count your spoots? New spoots?
Look, it like gives the illusion that I actually have long legs, even though I don't. These are stumps.
Oh my god, am I on? No, I'm on. Oh no. So we're good. Right? Yeah, okay. Dada, do you want to show the internet your belly? Or do you want to just start an OnlyFans account?